I never thought a house could feel like a stranger until I stepped into hers. The air was warm, faintly scented with lavender and old wood, and for a moment I hesitated at the threshold, as if walking in would erase some invisible line I wasn't sure I was allowed to cross. She was in the kitchen, back turned, humming quietly to herself while chopping vegetables with methodical care. Mid-40s, graceful, but in a lived-in way, not polished, not trying to impress anyone. Her hair, streaked with silver, caught the soft afternoon light and fell loosely over her shoulders. I wanted to reach out, just to brush it back, but I stayed frozen. I had no reason to be here, really. It's something about the way she moved, deliberate yet unaware, pulled me closer than any excuse I could invent. "Hey," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. She startled, turning slowly. Her eyes, that same shade of green I'd memorized without realizing it, softened when they landed on me. She didn't smile immediately. There was caution there, a subtle measuring of the distance between us, but the warmth underneath was impossible to ignore. "Hi," she replied, voice low, careful. "You're early." I shifted, unsure. I wanted to see you before." My sentence faltered, and I cursed myself silently. Every time I opened my mouth around her, words stumbled like clumsy dancers. She noticed I knew it. She always did. And yet, she didn't make me feel stupid, just human, exposed, like she could see everything I tried to hide and didn't care. We stood there for a moment, too close for comfort and yet not close enough. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, a simple meal half prepared, yet felt intimate, almost private, as if I'd stepped into a world I wasn't supposed to touch. My hands itched to do something, anything, to bridge the invisible gap. I wanted to lean forward and brush a stray strand of hair from her cheek, to trace the faint curve of her wrist, to tell her I'd been thinking about her more than I should have. Instead, I picked up a glass of water, my fingers trembling just slightly. She noticed the small tremor, her eyes flicking down to my hand and back up, like a secret acknowledgement of something neither of us would say aloud. "You look tired," she said softly, breaking the silence. I shrugged, but there was nothing casual about it. She stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth radiating off her. My chest tightened. I realized, suddenly, that I was standing too close for my own good. My brain screamed retreat, but my body refused to obey. She had always had that effect, making ordinary moments feel dangerously alive. A quiet laugh escaped her, half amused, half embarrassed, and I swore the sound would haunt me for days. I wanted to tell her everything. How the way she carried herself made me feel unreasonably seen. How every glance from her felt like a weightless confession. How my own heart had no instructions for a moment like this. And then, just as I was about to speak, the sharp trill of the doorbell cut through the warm, still air. She froze, and I felt my stomach lurch. Neither of us moved immediately, but our eyes met. A flash of shared understanding, tension, anticipation, something unspoken dangling between us like a fragile thread. I didn't know who it could be. I didn't know if I wanted to find out. But I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again after that ring. The doorbell had long stopped ringing, but the echo of it lingered in my chest, as if my heart had mistaken it for something urgent, something I couldn't quite name. She had moved past it, returning to the chopping board as though nothing had happened, and I tried to do the same. But the moment had shifted something. I knew her, of course, everyone in the neighborhood did, but I'd never really seen her until that day. She lived alone now, after a long marriage that ended quietly, almost without notice. I'd heard the whispers, the polite questions that never really landed anywhere. And yet I felt a tenderness toward her that no one else seemed to share. She'd carried her solitude with dignity, but I could see, in the small way she avoided mirrors or lingered by the window, that it hurt her sometimes. I wanted to reach into that pain, touch it, make it hers again, but she wasn't mine. Not yet. I, on the other hand, was untethered in ways that terrified me. 23, a wandering student with too much time and too few boundaries, I drifted through relationships like passing clouds. They'd never lasted. None of them mattered. But with her, the rules felt different. Something in her presence made me aware of myself in a way I'd never been before. My usual bravado evaporated, leaving a raw, unguarded version of me that she somehow tolerated. No, encouraged, without judgment. And then there was the taboo. Not that I could articulate it. Age, yes, but more than that, the unspoken context that made it dangerous. Her son, my friend from college. I hated that it complicated everything. Every stolen glance, every accidental brush of hands, felt like walking on a tightrope over a chasm I wasn't sure I could survive. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it made my pulse thrum, made my chest ache with a longing I had no right to feel. She noticed the tension too. I saw in the way she paused mid-chop when I lingered by the counter, in the slight catch of her breath, in the quick tilt of her head that made her hair fall perfectly over one shoulder. Her vulnerability was quiet, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. I wanted to be the one she confided in, even in the smallest, most trivial ways, to notice when she hadn't slept well, to pour her coffee just right, to ask about the dream she'd mentioned once and forgotten the next day. I stepped closer, carefully, as if the space between us might shatter if I moved too fast. My hand brushed hers, a grazing touch, accidental and deliberate at once, as I reached for the same knife to cut a stubborn carrot. She didn't pull away. Her fingers lingered against mine, warm and reassuring, and I swore I felt the air shift, thick with unspoken acknowledgement. "Remember that rainstorm last spring?" she said softly, almost as if testing me. I smiled, heart hammering. "The one we got trapped in by the bookstore?" She laughed, that soft, lilting sound that made my chest ache. "Yes, you insisted we take shelter under that tiny awning, even though we both got soaked." The memory felt intimate, tender, shared in a way no one else could touch. And in that small, stolen moment, fingertips brushing, voices low, laughter mingling, I realized we had begun something neither of us could name, but both of us felt deeply that I should have left. I told myself 100 times I should have left. But there I was, lingering in her kitchen, my heart thudding in a way that felt too loud, too obvious. The memory of our fingers brushing lingered like a spark ready to ignite. She looked up at me, a soft hesitation in her eyes, and I swore for a moment we might just collapse the distance between us. Leaning closer, I could feel the faint warmth of her breath, the subtle scent of lavender clinging to her skin. My throat went dry. I wanted to speak, to confess something dangerous, but the words died before they left my mouth. And then the front door creaked. My body stiffened. I glanced toward the hallway, my stomach dropping. Not her. Not now. Her son. He was home early, dragging a backpack heavier than he looked. He didn't see me at first, and I tried to shrink into the shadows, willing myself invisible. She stepped back, her posture suddenly rigid. I caught a flash of something in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? Desire? All tangled together. "Mom," he called, voice casual, oblivious. She straightened. "Hey, honey, didn't expect you so early." The tension between us was immediate, electric, almost painful. I wanted to vanish, to run, but instead I stayed frozen. She moved to greet him, and as she hugged him, I caught the curve of her shoulder, the way her fingers lingered too long at his back. I realized how little distance I actually had to the truth. I thought about leaving, retreating into the safe, familiar loneliness I carried with me. but I couldn't. Every instinct in me told me to stay, to risk exposure, to feel her near me, even if it meant disaster. Her son's backpack thudded to the floor. She laughed softly at something he said, a laugh meant for him, and only him, but it cut through me like a blade. My chest ached with a mixture of longing and guilt. I shouldn't feel this way. Not for her. Not like this. And yet I did. Can I grab something quick from the fridge? I asked, forcing my voice to stay casual. She glanced at me, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. I could feel her pulse, her hesitation, the temptation she was trying to bury beneath manners and maternal instinct. And then our eyes met for a heartbeat that stretched too long. It was almost too much. I could feel her breathing, uneven now, the faint tremble of her fingers as she turned to retrieve a drink. The air between us was charged, a wire-strung taut, ready to snap. I wanted to reach for her just for a second, to brush her hair behind her ear, to whisper something reckless, to taste the forbidden edge of what we were both feeling. But the sound of the fridge door closing was a cruel reminder. Reality was still here. Her son was there. The risk was real. The moment hung suspended, unfinished, unclaimed. And yet in that impossible electric pause, I felt it. The pull, the gravity of her presence, stronger than any fear, stronger than any sense of right or wrong. I stayed. I couldn't leave, and neither could she. The apartment felt smaller than it had before, though nothing had changed. Just her, just me. The space between us had grown taut with everything we hadn't said. I couldn't stop thinking about him, her son. Every small glance she gave him, every gentle touch on his shoulder, made a tight coil of jealousy twist in my chest. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't help it. And I knew she sensed it. The way her eyes flicked to mine when she thought I wasn't watching. The half smile that was almost an apology, or maybe a warning. I should have left. I should have walked out hours ago. But the moment she reached for her coffee cup, her hand brushing mine again by accident, or maybe on purpose, I froze. That brush sent sparks shooting straight to my chest. My stomach knotted. I realized I wanted more than fleeting touches, more than stolen glances. I wanted her, all of her, in ways I knew were dangerous and reckless. "Why are you still here?" she asked, voice low, almost trembling. There was something behind her words, something she didn't dare say aloud. Desire? Confusion? Fear? It was all tangled, and I wanted to untangle it, though I knew I shouldn't. I don't know. I admitted, my own voice rough, unsteady. "I I can't leave." She laughed softly, but it was bitter, almost a sigh. "You shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't let you feel that way." Her words hit me like a slap, sharp and urgent. The tension between us felt unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the wind was stronger than your balance. And yet, every instinct screamed at me to close the distance, to claim the moment before it vanished. We lingered near the counter, so close that our shoulders brushed. I could feel her heartbeat beneath her thin blouse. I could see the subtle tremor in her fingers. The air smelled of coffee, rosemary, and something uniquely hers, something I wanted to memorize, to inhale, to keep with me forever. "I can't," she whispered suddenly, turning away for a fraction of a second, as if admitting it aloud might shatter everything. I shouldn't. And still, she didn't move. She didn't step back. Her body leaned slightly toward me, the barest hint of surrender hiding behind her restraint. My hand twitched, aching to reach out, to close the last centimeter between us, to feel her against me. I wanted to ask the question, the one that could ruin us or make everything right. "Do you feel it too?" But the words stuck in my throat. Every second, we stood there stretched into eternity. The weight of everything, Past mistakes, future fears, the impossible risks pressed down on me, heavy and relentless. Then the world seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes, wide and glimmering with something I couldn't yet name, met mine. I wanted to lean forward. She wanted to lean forward. We were on the edge. And then, a knock at the door. Sharp, unmistakable. Reality intruded. Neither of us moved, but the moment shattered like glass. The knock on the door had barely faded when my chest started pounding like a warning drum. She froze, hand mid-air, as if she could will the intruder away. I barely breathed, caught in the suspended weight of what might happen next. She opened the door crack. A shadow fell across her face. My heart sank instantly. It wasn't her son. It wasn't a neighbor. It was him, her ex-husband. He stepped in without invitation, eyes scanning the kitchen with a casual arrogance that made my stomach twist. "Hey," he said, voice too smooth, too practiced. "Thought I'd drop by. Haven't seen you in a while." Her jaw tightened. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand clenched on the edge of the counter. And I felt it too, the suffocating weight of risk pressing down on us. This wasn't a small complication. This was the kind of complication that could undo everything before it even began. "Jason," she said cautiously, voice measured, but I caught the tremor. A flicker of something she wasn't ready to show me. Fear, maybe, or anger, or both. I wanted to step back, wanted to shrink into a corner and disappear. But I couldn't. Not now. Not when she was standing there, so impossibly close and vulnerable. My hands itched to reach for hers, to signal that I was here, that I wouldn't leave. Jason's gaze landed on me for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to feel the judgment, the silent accusation of my presence. And then he turned back to her. "We need to talk," he said, casual, but there was an edge, a threat hidden in the softness. She sighed, brushing a hand across her forehead. "Not now. I'm Busse." He smirked. "Busy with?" His eyes flicked to me. Time slowed. The air seemed to thicken with every unspoken word. I felt heat rising to my ears, a cocktail of fear, anger, and desire twisting in my gut. Her gaze met mine for a brief, fleeting second, panic, regret, longing all tangled together, before she turned back to him. I said, "Not now." She repeated, firmer this time. Her spine straightened, her voice carrying the weight of someone standing on the edge, refusing to fall. I wanted to say something, anything, to break this suffocating tension. But words felt useless here. Everything we'd been feeling, all the slow, dangerous pull between us, now carried a new edge, the edge of exposure, of consequence. I realized then that nothing was safe anymore. Every glance, every brush of fingers, every stolen moment we thought belonged to us could be erased in an instant. And yet, despite the fear, despite the stakes, the pull toward her only intensified. She took a small step toward me, just enough that her shoulders brushed. I could feel her pulse, could see the conflict raging behind her eyes. We were both on fire with desire and dread, knowing that crossing a line now could change everything. But neither of us could resist it completely. Jason didn't leave. The threat lingered like a storm cloud over us. And in that charged silence, I knew nothing could ever go back to how it was. The apartment was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Jason had left, or at least that was what I hoped. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know if I should speak or just stay frozen, letting the weight of the last hours settle between us. "I can't. I shouldn't," she began, her voice trembling despite the effort to steady it. She stopped, searching my face, and I saw it. All the longing, all the restraint, all the fear she'd been carrying reflected back at me. I stepped closer, almost instinctively, and she didn't move away. Not this time. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel in my throat. I wanted to reach for her, to take all the risk, all the consequences, and wrap them up in a single moment. I can't stay silent anymore, I whispered, my voice barely audible, but it was enough. Enough that her eyes softened, just slightly, and the air between us shifted. Her hand lifted, brushing against mine, tentative, almost shy, but deliberate enough that I knew she wanted this as much as I did. My breath caught. I can't stay away from you either, she admitted, voice low, raw. Everything inside me shifted then, the tension, the danger, the risk. It all melted away in that fleeting truth. I wanted to tell her everything, that I'd thought about her every day, that I'd been terrified of feeling this, that I'd been waiting for her in ways I couldn't explain, but words failed. So I let my hand cover hers. She didn't pull away. We just stood there, fingers entwined, the warmth of her hand a tether to reality and desire at once. The quiet in the apartment felt different now, softer, intimate, alive with the possibility of what could happen next. The world outside, the risks, the judgment, all of it existed, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Not fully. Her eyes searched mine, seeking confirmation, permission, understanding. I gave it without words, letting my gaze say everything I couldn't articulate. She nodded, a small, imperceptible movement, and I knew she understood me. Truly, the pull between us was magnetic, undeniable. Close enough to feel each other's warmth, each heartbeat, yet we didn't cross the final line. Not yet. Not because of fear, but because the moment needed to breathe, needed to be savored, not ruined by haste. I don't know what comes next, she whispered, almost afraid to admit it. Neither do I said, voice soft, steady, honest. But I know I don't want to go back. Her lips curved into the smallest, almost imperceptible smile. A smile that carried relief, longing, and promise all at once. I wanted to lean forward to close the distance entirely, but I held back, letting the tension linger like a living thing between us. We were exposed, vulnerable, and terrified, but together. That was enough for now. Enough to know that whatever came next, we had crossed a line in our hearts that couldn't be erased. And in that fragile, electric silence, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. We were no longer pretending. The next morning, sunlight spilled across her living room in long, golden streaks. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the faint residue of last night's tension. I sat across from her at the small kitchen table, nursing a cup I hadn't noticed I'd poured, watching her stir her tea with a slow, deliberate motion. She caught my gaze and smiled, not the tentative, cautious smile of before, but one that carried relief and acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement of what we had survived together. We didn't need words to define it. The silence between us was fuller than any declaration I could have made. I don't think I've ever done something this reckless, she said softly, and I couldn't help laughing, a low, breathy sound that made her chuckle in return. It was a shared laughter, intimate, grounding, like we had created a small world in which only we existed. I don't care, I admitted, heart hammering in my chest. Not really. It feels right. Somehow. She looked down at her cup, then back at me, eyes reflecting 1,000 emotions. Right and wrong, all tangled together, she whispered. I was so scared, of losing control, of making mistakes, of being seen like that. I reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. She let me. I wanted you to see me, I said quietly. All of me, even the parts I'm afraid of. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, the hesitation that had defined her presence melted. I see you, she said, and the weight of those words settled into me like a warm, solid thing. We spent the morning talking in fits and starts. Sometimes words failed. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes a silence hung between us like a fragile thread. But through it all, I realized that the boundaries we had feared, the rules we thought would keep us safe, no longer mattered. We had chosen each other, even if the world didn't fully understand why or how. By the time the afternoon sun slanted low, I knew we were past the point of pretending. She leaned back in her chair, her hand resting lightly over mine, and I felt the pulse of certainty I hadn't known I was looking for. This was real, messy, human, and ours. And yet, the story wasn't over. The outside world would always exist. Questions remained. How will we navigate the risks, the judgments, the impossible complications? Could this fragile connection withstand the scrutiny and the pressure? But for the first time, I didn't care. We had each other in this moment, and that was enough. I stood, brushing crumbs from the table, and she mirrored me. Our hands met in the middle, lingering, deliberate. I wanted to hold her forever, but I also wanted to respect the careful pace we had built together. "Are we really doing this?" she asked, voice small, cautious. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We are, one day at a time. And if we stumble together." Her smile widened, a mixture of hope, fear, and undeniable desire. And as we stepped toward the window, watching the city bathe in the soft glow of evening, I knew we had crossed a line and that we weren't going back. Are we ready to face the world as we are? Can love really survive the impossible? And in the quiet moments, will we still choose each other every single time?